Kishotenketsu is a plot structure in classic Chinese, Japanese, and Korean stories. It is made up of 4 parts: Ki, introduction; Sho, development; Ten, twist; and Ketsu, conclusion. I saw it applied to anime before, and I hated it. I think 3-act structure is significantly superior. These are how I describe the 3 acts. Act 1 is the setup, Act 2 is the journey, Act 3 is the final battle. Both Kisho and 3-act are theoretically able to be applied to any story as long as you are flexible enough. For example, most people would split Batman Begins into 3 acts, but I've seen it split into 4. Act 1 is Batman's training, Act 2 is versus Falcone, Act 3 is versus Scarecrow, and Act 4 is versus Roz. That makes sense because each of these acts ends in a climactic scene that is more powerful than the preceding scenes, like McKee said. But if I wanted 3 acts, I could fuse Falcone and Scarecrow into 1, and it would still make sense. It's all about how flexible you're willing to be as an analyst. So why did I hate Kisho? Plot structures are supposed to help people understand how to write a plot. When 3-act splits a plot into setup, journey, and final battle, it's so intuitive. Automatically, I can split nearly every movie into 3 acts. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or a veteran writer. I believe anyone could get it if it was explained to them the way I explained it. On the other hand, Kisho is not intuitive. With just the simple 4 words of describing each section, I can't get a good grasp of how to analyze or write a story. What counts as development? Where's the twist supposed to happen? Can I only have 1 twist? That's strike 1. These problems are only magnified when I look at how Kisho is supposed to apply to stories. I will be using 3 sources: the Mythic Scribe page on Kisho, Pause and Select's video on AOT, and the Cynic Clinic's video on Kisho. My first problem stems from Scribes, where the page says that Kisho is a story structure without conflict. The page further clarifies that it's not built into the structure by default. Conflict is the engine of any plot, so if a plot structure doesn't have conflict built into it, why would anyone use it? That's strike 2. In the Clinic video, he says Ki sets up the characters, setting, and situation. Sho builds on Ki by adding new information, but without major changes. Ten is an unexpected event that recontextualizes the previous 2 acts. Ketsu resolves the main through line and ties everything together. Pause explains it as giving the audience info on the general premise, then expanding on it, then shifting the vantage point, and then reconciling the shift with what was developed in the first 2 acts. This is basically the same thing. With these explanations, the structure becomes even less intuitive. The Scribes page splits up Han Solo's journey from episode 4 using Kisho. I want you to quickly split Han's journey using Kisho, and then 3 acts, and we'll compare our answers. Will you end up with the same 4 acts as Scribes? Will you end up with the same 3 acts as me? Let's find out. Ki, introduce Han Solo. Sho, establish that Han doesn't believe in hokey religions. 10, reveal the Empire blew up the planet Han's passengers wanted to go to. Ketsu, conclude that Han has good sides too. Is that what you also came up with? I'm willing to bet it's not. My turn. Act 1, Han is introduced to Luke and Obi-Wan. Act 2, they all board the ship and escape. It ends with Han leaving after saving Leia. Act 3, Han returns to the rebellion and saves Luke. If you've seen A New Hope and remembered my description of 3 acts, I'm willing to bet you came up with the same thing. So if 2 people applying the same structure to the same story results in wildly different results, it's not very useful. If they get similar results, it's useful and it shows how intuitive it is. Clinic splits Kimi no Nawa with Kisho. I will be splitting it with 3 acts and comparing which is more useful. Ki, we get the premise of how Taki and Mitsuha switch bodies. Sho, they start communicating and adjust to body swapping. 10, they stop switching and the time travel twist comes, revealing that Mitsuha is dead. Ketsu, Taki swaps one more time to warn the people in the past, saving them from the natural disaster. I can't lie, he kinda cooked here, but I have a twist of my own, like Snyder's beat sheet, which is based on 3 acts. My turn. Act 1, Taki and Mitsuha are introduced, but then a body swap occurs. That's the inciting incident. Act 2, the characters get used to body swapping. All is lost when Mitsuha is dead. Act 3, Taki swaps one more last time to warn the town of the disaster. See, the beat sheet has an all is lost moment, which is supposed to happen right before Act 3. Now, it works out perfectly and gives a better visual for how the stakes increased over time. Both structures are basically the same in this case, but 3 acts made more sense with the help of Snyder. Pause splits AOT Season 1 into 2 sections and applies Kisho to both of them. The story introduces the conditions and launches them into the middle of the war. The dramatic twist is when Eren turns into a Titan. The conclusion isn't specified by Pause, but is presumably the eve of the counterattack arc, where Eren has his trial and is sent to Levi's squad. Take note of how much content he had to skip in order to apply Kisho. Does this sound like a logical way to split up AOT's first half? It sure doesn't to me. There's one thing I refrained from mentioning about 3 acts. In the Act 2, there's often a midpoint in the center, which is a false victory or false defeat. Here's how I divide the first half of Season 1. Act 1 is all the flashback stuff. Act 2 starts when the Colossal Titan attacks. The midpoint is Eren's apparent death, a false defeat. Act 3 starts with the plan to see a wall rose. If you ask me, that's far more intuitive and helpful as a writer. For the second half, he describes the introduction and development as they set up what they need to do as well as Eren's role. It seems like he had to be vague in order to fit the story into Kisho. The twist is encountering the female Titan and the mole. Once again, he skips the conclusion, but I think it's self-explanatory. I don't think this is helpful either. Because he used Kisho, he ended up only really addressing the twist when there is so much more to the story, which is what happened in the first half too. My turn. Act 1 is from Sonny and Bean's deaths to the preparation for the 57th exterior scouting mission. Act 2 starts when the scouting mission starts. The midpoint is when the scouts retreat and throw the corpses off the carriages, a false defeat. Act 3 begins with the mission of getting Annie underground. Once again, which one sounds more useful, Kisho or 3 acts? Paul says Kisho is less focused on conflict and more on dynamism when defending his statement on how Kisho is the plot without conflict. I get that Kisho is going for different things, but at the end of the day, it's a plot structure that isn't very helpful at structuring plots. Listening to Paul's breakdown AOT didn't give me a clear picture of what the story actually looked like. It sounded like he was just cherry picking his favorite moments. I believe my explanation gave you a clear picture of what happened in the plot and how the stakes kept rising. If you were trying to write AOT or map out his plot, you couldn't just use Kisho alone. You would have to include 3 acts. The 3 acts could be used alone in that situation, so what's the point of using Kisho? There's more in the Cynic Clinic and Pause and Select videos, but this isn't a response video. It's an analysis on Kishotenketsu and its value as a writing tool. I think everyone did a good job of applying Kisho to the best of their abilities. After all this research, I don't hate it anymore. Based on all that I've heard, Kisho is like a side quest in a game after you've completed the main quest. It's a fancy technique that you can add on top of 3 acts, but you can't write or analyze stories effectively by only using Kisho. You have to eventually use 3 acts to make sense of everything. It's like sprinkles on ice cream. You can eat the ice cream alone, but you can't eat sprinkles alone. The sprinkles have to be on ice cream. I think Kisho is unnecessary and unhelpful to beginners. Read a screenwriting book.